Welcome to Dawg Day Afternoon. I am Gilles Gallant with BetsTV and FTN Bets. You can follow me on Twitter at GDog5000. Welcome to the betting show where we talk some NFL, give a little bit of sports betting advice, maybe some unsolicited life advice along the way, give a few picks. And again, we don't take things too seriously around here. This is sports betting. I think we should have a lot of fun with it. And every week I'm going to cover the latest odds in the NFL, take you to my thought process, maybe why I think the way I do. And we've got a special guest today. We've got Geoff Shasby, old man who bets. You can find him at 1:37 p.m. He writes occasionally for DraftKings, one of the sharpest sports bettors I know that's out there, and somebody that I follow, especially for that kind of advice. Geoff, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate the kind words. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right now.
All right. And I appreciate the Yankees hat that you got going on right now. It's a fresh look. Me being a Jays fan and you being a Yankees fan, it feels like this is going to be a war of words to start off. But this is a friendly program. We're going to keep it nice and cordial.
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees are the worst team in the league right now. So you got nothing to worry about, and I got nothing to say other than we're going to keep blowing games to shitty teams. It's going to be awesome.
We got a big series against each other coming up, too. So that's going to be really fun, interested to see how the wild card in the American League plays out. Now, we're going to move on to the NFL here. And one of the things that I like to do, Geoff, to start off Dawg Day Afternoon is to maybe pay attention to some of the things that we've seen in the first 2 weeks and see what's apparent to me. Some of the things that could be, outlandish hot takes. They could be as obvious as anything else. So the first thing that we're going to start with is called apparently. And the first thing that I want to ask you, Geoff, and I want to know if it's as apparent to me as it is to you. Apparently, the Las Vegas Raiders are the best team in football. They're 2-0. They took down the Steelers at Heinz Field, eked out that win against the Baltimore Ravens, who have now arguably probably the best win in the NFL this season over the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. How far off base am I in saying that the Las Vegas Raiders are the best team in football right now?
I mean, I think relatively off base. I don't think that the Raiders are bad by any means. And, I was also looking at the Houston Texans as Tyrod Taylor marched them down the field, and I'm thinking perhaps Super Bowl caliber. I don't think it's as that egregious of a take, but I think they're overperforming. Obviously, I love what Derek Carr's doing here. But I tried to make some sense of this. Obviously, you sent me over some notes. I was trying to quantify how much are they underperforming? How much are they overperforming? So I did dive into some brief data here, looking at Football Outsiders specifically. They've got two metrics that I love to look at. The first is DVOA. That's defense adjusted value over average. That's looking at success of a play versus other outcomes in the NFL. And then they also have a stat called DAVE. It's DVOA adjusted for variation early. So essentially it's taking DVOA, but also factoring in preseason expectations. So it's a little bit of like an ERA versus expected ERA, right? A little bit of an FIP versus expected FIP for any of the baseball nerds we have on here. But
I love it.
Again, the Raiders here, their defensive DVOA right now is number 9 in the league. Of course, that's very good. And they've played two pretty good teams, but the defensive DAVE is number 20. So for me, that says that their defense is overperforming, that they should regress. And that makes sense. Nobody, I think, was looking at the Raiders to be a powerhouse on D this year. And then their offense actually appears to be underperforming a little bit, which you got to feel good about if you're a Derek Carr owner on fantasy, averaging 408 yards per game. Pretty impressive. But nonetheless, I do think that this team will come back down to earth. I mean, I'd like to see them beat the Chiefs. And obviously they have. They've been one of those teams in the last few years that has played the Chiefs a little bit closer than maybe everybody expected. But nonetheless, I'm not going to call them the best team in the league after 2 weeks of football. But I like it.
And the other thing, too, is I think I want to reiterate to people that really I'm just throwing some hot takes out there like noodles on the wall and seeing what sticks. And I think the one thing reason why I liked the Raiders coming into the year is how their offense performed last year. They were top 10 in scoring. Mm-hmm. They have some blue chip players across the board. And, they've slowly been building out that roster since they dealt Khalil Mack. One of the few teams, in fact, the only team really that I would say legitimately beat Kansas City last year because the Week 16 loss, they didn't even play their players. And so they finished 14-2 last year, beat Kansas City on their home field. And you have to think that Steelers win might be a little overweighed just because of how Ben Roethlisberger has looked so far through 2 weeks. For the most part, I don't want to say he's cooked, but he's not the Ben Roethlisberger of previous years.
Yeah, I mean, he's looking a little bit like Peyton Manning in the last season of his, right? It's just not what it once was. It's certainly not the ever handsome Tom Brady. And, I think we think about the best team in the league. We think about even the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs got exposed in the Super Bowl because they don't have it on both sides of the ball. I think this is going to be a similar outcome for this Raiders team. We think about even the Ravens game here. It was the first game of the season. They're or Gus goes down. They're thinner than ever at running, and they're a running team. And Latavius Murray averaged like 2 yards per carry. He obviously bounced back in week 2 with a little bit more.
Scored a touchdown.
Yeah, love to hear that. But, I think it was one of those things that they were just obviously opportunistic, preseason expectations high as ever for Baltimore. But this is the team that came out and didn't execute on offense, and they still scored a decent amount of points.
Sure did.
Obviously, you look at week 2, the Chiefs, a terrible run defense. The Ravens exploited that, pretty large here. And this is a Raiders rush defense with the DVOA of number 17 in the league, even after 1 and 2. So that's based off actual results. And it just seems like that's going to be enough to, be the Achilles heel for them. But they're a lot of fun. I put in a waiver claim for Derek Carr because, but We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. And I mean, it could be funny too with the Raiders, because you could argue they're the 4th best team in their own division, like just with the Broncos and the Chargers and of course the Chiefs. We're going to move on to another subject here, Geoff. And I want to know if this is apparent to me as it is to you. So apparently nobody wants to win the 2021 NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. Like, right now, I can't really see one quarterback that is really standing out at this point. I mean, I would maybe even argue the case that right now Jamar Chase has probably been the best offensive rookie so far. You could still get him at 14-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Is it that apparent to me as it is to you, Geoff?
Yeah, I don't think anybody stood out yet. And I think I love the long shot odds on Chase there. I think his volume needs to increase, and I think he needs to be a little bit more clutch, more consistently. Of course, he went off week 1. What was it, 101, I want to say, and a score, but he had 2 for 21 in the second half, kind of disappeared. We look at last week. Obviously, he scored a touchdown, another 46-yard score, something along those lines. But that was when they're down 20-3 in the second half. So I think the long shot odds there are more of a reflection of him being a game changer on a team that's going to win. You look at Mac Jones plus 350. He hasn't wowed yet. He's been good enough, but I think the Vegas odds factoring that in is bringing a team that is going to actually make a playoff run. So whether that's them, whether that's Trey Lance, if he ever gets a shot, if that's Justin Fields turning around this Bears team, I just feel like that is, even regardless of statistical significance or output, I feel like those wins in the win column is going to what's matter most. And I don't know if the Bengals will have enough of those to really matter.
Yeah. And the same thing, like right now, if you're weighing basically all of those quarterbacks and looking at it just from a standings perspective, it's probably still Mac Jones, just from a Patriots perspective of maybe winning double-digit games. He is right now the favorite for that. I personally, again, I just wouldn't feel good if I had a bet on, Mac Jones or Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence, just what we've seen through 2 weeks. Obviously, there's a lot of season left and a lot can happen. But even like people who bet on like Kyle Pitts, for example, thinking that a tight end would be able to kind of come in and revolutionize and become, I mean, the way he was hyped before the season started, he might as well have been a top 3 tight end entering the league and playing with the Falcons. He's not really being able to showcase all of those skills. Now we're going to move on to the next one here. This is the final apparently type of perspective I have here. So Geoff, apparently a team from the NFC West is going to win the Super Bowl. I can't see a better collection of teams right now and throughout the divisions. Right now, obviously, I think the Rams are probably the cream of the crop of that division. Maybe the Niners, depending on what you took away from those 2 games. Seattle, I think, is better than that week 2 loss. I think they just kind of let that game slip away. They should probably be 2-0. And even the Cardinals, while I think that they'll probably still continue to get better, they might be a little bit more down just because they probably should have lost in week 2 against the Vikings. Am I that far off base in thinking that a team from the NFC West is going to win the Super Bowl in 2022?
I don't think that's that far off at all. I mean, I think it's going to be the Tampa Bay Bucks personally, but this Cardinals team, I think what to watch there is going to be the defensive side of things. They've allowed only 46 points so far this season, which is rather low, and they're putting up unbelievable numbers. Kyle looks as electric as everybody was hoping for him to be. So if I was going to take a long shot based off of these apparently, I'd probably look at that Cardinals team and making a fun run. mainly because I don't think the Vikings are as bad as people are chalking them up to be. Obviously, it's Kirk Cousins, but Kirk Cousins makes plays. It's not sexy. He's faster than people think. I don't hate Kirk at all. So I don't hate that claim at all. I think of the three apparently, I think that's the one that's most likely to happen.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, the Vikings, not to dive too deep into them, we're going to get into them in a minute, but they've got skill players everywhere. Like offensively, they're probably the envy of a lot of teams in the NFL when it comes to running back and skill positions like wide receiver. But just bad luck in the kicking game, just the kick in the nuts, like, just repeatedly, really in 2 weeks straight, because they probably should have won in week 1 as well against the Bengals week. We've got 2-2-0 teams that we're going to look at and another team that is 0-2. So the first team I wanted to look at with you is the Carolina Panthers. And when you look at this team, to win the Super Bowl sitting at 50-1, Christian McCaffrey, NFL MVP, is also 50-1. McCaffrey as well to win Comeback Player of the Year, sitting at plus 750. And one that I find is really intriguing is to win the NFC South at plus 550. Geoff, if you had to bet on one of these 4 futures for Carolina, which one would you do?
I would have to lock into a McCaffrey prop here for sure. I think winning the Super Bowl is lighting money on fire. Shout out to Sam Darnold, the Jets' darling there. But I don't think that's even in the realm of possibility. I don't think them winning the NFC South is either. You look at what they've done so far. They've got 45 points for them so far. They've only allowed 21. I think that's best in the league right now, if not top 5. But they played the Jets, and then they played literally the coachless Saints team because they all decided to get COVID this week. Meanwhile, you look at the Bucs in that division, 79 points for and 54 against. So this offense is insane. Their defense is good enough, and they've played some pretty good teams in week 1 and week 2. So that's just a bet I don't want to touch. Meanwhile, CMC here, obviously one of the best players in the league, and he's continued to pick up where he was last year. He's got the most yards from scrimmage after week 2, averaging 162 per game. So for Comeback Player of the Year, leading the league in yards from scrimmage, that feels pretty good. If he can get his TDs up a little bit, I don't see why he wouldn't have one of the top shots there. So at 50-1, that seems pretty juicy for one of the best players in the league. And for Comeback Player of the Year, I'm not even sure off the top of my head who else is coming back that's actually done well so far. So I feel pretty good about the CMC.
Just a guy named Dak Prescott, just throwing that out there. But at
Dak's
the same time,
good too.
I will agree that here's the thing. I pretty much agree with everything you just said. I wouldn't bet them to win the Super Bowl at 50-1. I'd probably need at least 80-1 odds to feel comfortable even doing that. And even then, it would be feeling like a throwaway bet. I might as well just donate that. And the NFL MVP, I've been more vocal about this than anybody, that you don't bet on a running back to win MVP. Last one to win was Adrian Peterson back in 2012. He had to rush for 2,000 yards just to do it. Derrick Henry did that last year, and they still wouldn't give it to him. They had to give him Offensive Player of the Year instead, which, again, still a great award, but at the same time, it's the reason why it's a quarterback award for that reason. Comeback Player of the Year, I do like. I think Dak, if he plays all 16 games, I think it's going to be difficult just because of the narrative and playing with the Cowboys. And if they win, if they're above 500, I think it's a lock for him. But I will counter just with the NFC South. And the only reason why I bring this up is if you watch the Buccaneers defense in those first 2 weeks, they were getting gouged in passing. Like, just, I couldn't believe that it was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. Like, you look at the final score against the Falcons, you would have thought that was just a rout. And instead it was, 2 pick sixes in the final quarter. And you don't even know how it happened. And I think the one thing is it's going to be a very key indicator when they end up playing later on this season, because we still have 2 games where they have to face each other heads up. And then, of course, the Bucs playing against the Rams this week. If for whatever reason, if the Bucs don't manage to win that game on the road, and if the Panthers do, they'd obviously elevate in the standings, and it just makes it a little bit less margin for error. But I agree with you. I think right now with McCaffrey, I think that's the best value because Dak is coming off injury. And if he gets hurt 3-4 weeks in, just kind of what we saw last year, I think he's the front runner right from there. So I think we're basically lockstep with that. We're going to move on to the next team now. We talked about them earlier at the start of the show, and it is the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders to win the Super Bowl, 35-1. You had just picked up Derek Carr in fantasy. He is looking like an MVP candidate. He is sitting at 20-1 to win MVP. John Gruden for Coach of the Year, if you're really thinking about that, at 16-1. I still have my Sean Payton shares, so I'm probably not going to win that one. But Raiders to win the AFC West, despite being 2-0, we talked about whether or not where they even rank in a pecking order in the division. They're fourth in the division odds at 11-1. Of these four, Geoff, would you bet on one of them?
This is a tough one for me here. Derek Carr for MVP, I just don't think is going to happen. I looked at his yards per game. He's averaging 400 this year, right? 408. Last 6 seasons, 249, 262, 233, 253, 253, and 256. So you throw 408 in there. One of these things is not like the other. Not that he's not a gunslinger, not that he doesn't have one of the most talented receiving corps he's ever had, especially with Waller, with Ruggs stepping up, a pretty good running back, Drake in the passing game. Obviously all good things there, but that just doesn't seem sustainable. I feel like a lot of these Raiders props, we talked about overreactions, underreactions as kind of an NFL early season. I feel like buying anything on the Raiders right now is probably an overreaction, and you're buying at an all-time high. Yes, they're still fourth in the division in odds, but if they go out and drop one to the Chiefs real quick, that's going to quickly drop even more. They only need to split with the Chiefs to win this, to win this division. So I'd rather them hopefully drop 1 or 2 and then come back with a roaring second half and just get deeper value on that. So I don't like to buy high, even though I sometimes do, especially with, moonshots like Doge, and just lose all my money on that front. But I feel like this is a little bit of a buying high moment, which, something I don't like to do. I mean, I guess the juxtaposition there is that, well, it's still pretty juicy odds. So like you're still getting decent upside, but I think there could be more upside to be had if we wait and see on this one.
Yeah, and the MVP part, I completely agree with, because we completely missed the value. If you were going to do it, you had to do it at the start of the year when you could have got them at 50-1. Now down to 20-1, still decent value, but again, you're asking for continued performance and play like that. And at 400 yards passing per game, that's just not sustainable, especially in a division when you're sharing with Patrick Mahomes, who could throw 400 yards in his sleep. To win the Super Bowl, again, probably wouldn't feel that great about it, just because, again, I feel like there are 2 teams in their own division that have not only better odds, but I think just better teams to be able to get to that mountaintop and win the Super Bowl. John Gruden for Coach of the Year, though, that one I feel like might be I don't love it, but at the same time, I feel like you could talk me into it, because again, if just, let's say they don't win the division, but they win 12 games and, they're completely remodeled, they get the top wild card slot. I could see like AP writers and the media and narrative, and just how long he worked in the media. I could see them kind of bending to that narrative of saying, look at the job John Gruden has done, and that kind of thing. And that just kind of building up momentum as we get to the end of the season. At 16-1, it's not the best odds you could get. You could have got him at like 30-1 when the season started. But those would probably be the 2. AFC West, I'm with you. I think that's just going to be too much of a mountain to climb to get past 3 teams that are all, at least on the surface, on paper, I would think are better than. I think you could maybe make a case that they're probably even to the Broncos, but the Chargers and Chiefs, I think, still are better. We're going to move over to the third team now. We talked about them earlier, maybe some of the unlucky little bit of Kirk Cousins action here. We're going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings. At the time of overreacting, they're 0-2. But to win the Super Bowl, a thing that they have yet to achieve in franchise history, is 66-1. Kirk Cousins for NFL MVP at 80-1. Dalvin Cook to win Offensive Player of the Year at 25-1. And the Vikings to come back and win the NFC North at plus 450. Honestly, Geoff, looking at some of these futures odds, I'm not as enthused with these comparatively to, say, like Carolina or Vegas. But to win the Super Bowl, probably not as much, but I'm kind of digging the Cousins for NFL MVP at 80-1 if they're able to turn this completely around. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, this seems like a good buy low there. Not that I love it either way. Kirk Cousins right now hasn't thrown a pick this year. He has, I think it's a 2.2 interception rate, which is like pretty middle of the pack for quarterbacks over the course of his career. So you got to think those interceptions are coming. And that's kind of just him being a gunslinger, making some questionable decisions under pressure, right? But I don't hate it, right? I think at 0-2, it's a buy low, which is nice. You're not overpaying for that. But I think you said it. If they don't win these games, there's not a chance that he's going to win that MVP, even if it's their kicker that's missing the kicks and it's not his fault at all. I don't see him getting it. But again, buy low there at plus 800 or 8,000. Kirk, the gunslinger Cousins, I always feel decent about that. And he's throwing to some studs. I mean, Osborne's looked pretty good. I think he leads the league or at least the team in receptions so far. Don't quote me on that.
Receptions.
Yeah. But then you obviously have Justin Jefferson, who's a beast. Adam Thielen, one of the best red zone targets in the league. Dalvin Cook, hopefully he can stay healthy for a full 16 games, which I don't think he's done so far.
Through a full game, let alone
he was looking a little banged up after week 2 as well. That's like probably my only concern about that future there is just his lack of ability to stay healthy. I mean, obviously he's explosive, but at the same time, CMC is playing in a similar odds. I'd probably still lean towards the Panthers on that one of being a little bit more impactful for their team. Not that Dalvin Cook isn't, but I feel like CMC is the offense in Carolina, where Cook is a very important cog in a very good offense.
And I worry about the Cook angle as well, even if Cousins was to, somehow carry this team back into a winning record and to get into the playoff picture, because I don't think Cousins can do this by himself. It would have to be the exploits of Cook helping to push them past that threshold. And I'm curious, and in fact, I'm actually dubious that writers would vote for Cousins, like almost like Cousins and Cook would end up splitting the vote. And that's what I worry about just in that instance.
Yeah, I agree, man. And, this is a Minnesota team that I think is obviously underperforming. They shouldn't be 0-2 here. But, we talk about the Super Bowl or the odds to win the division. This defense, I think, is still going to continue to be an issue. Their Dave rating here is not particularly solid. It's at 15 for the overall team, but 21 in terms of defensive DVOA. So hard to win games when you're not a complete team, no matter how many points you put up. And I think we saw that with the Vikings, especially in week 2.
Absolutely. A quick little peek into week 3 odds. This one's probably a little more surprise. I know you've probably already been locking in some bets for week 3. I've already locked in a few personal bets and just kind of seeing where the odds will go. But Heather, the few games have caught my eye for week 3, and I wanted to know your thoughts whether or not you feel comfortable with betting on those kind of odds or that kind of spread, and if whether or not you will end up betting it going into Sunday. First one. AFC West divisional matchup, Chargers at Chiefs, plus 6.5 for the Chargers. I thought that one stood out to me. Bengals plus 4.5 versus the Steelers. And Bucks were -1 versus the Rams this morning. That has since flipped. They're now +1 to go on the road to win at SoFi. And finally, NFC East matchup, Eagles +4 versus the Cowboys. Do any of these 4 games intrigue you as far as underdogs are concerned, or are you going the other way and going to lay some points here?
Good question. What was the first one you said? We said Chargers, Chiefs. That was
Chargers plus 6.5
right?
versus the Chiefs.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. I feel like Mahomes hasn't been great against the spread. This Chiefs team, it's always overinflated a little bit. Obviously, I had them 3.5 on Sunday night. I went to bed, accidentally fell asleep, woke up as a loser, went to bed as a winner. Just how that happened. So I always struggle with them as a large favorite. We're talking about elite teams as favorites. Like I back the Bucks and Brady far more than I back Mahomes and the Chiefs. So I think that's one you could look that would be interesting on the Chargers sides of things. And they did play, you look at their maybe the quote offensive woes. They played some pretty good defenses. That Washington defense in week 1, obviously fierce. And I think people they acknowledge it, but I don't think into a point of acknowledging it to bet on it about how good that defense really is. There was that one clip, I think last week, of Chase Young, like running down Saquon Barkley. Like that is insane. What were the other games? Hit me one here.
That one, I'm probably just to agree with you. It's right at the point where books know this. They know that they're going to put you in a quandary of a decision here. Do you take the Chiefs, who could probably on paper win by 20, or do you take the Chargers to keep it within a touchdown, not a touchdown, within a touchdown, and get squeezed out there? So Bengals plus 4.5 on the road to the Steelers, Bucks plus 1 versus the Rams, and Eagles plus 4. So that would be versus the Cowboys.
I think that Bengals one is super interesting as well. You already mentioned it, Big Ben looking like Peyton Manning from a few years ago. Just not what he once was. And I think Joe Burrow's ATS record, especially as a road underdog, is fantastic. I think he was 7-2-1, at least coming into last week or maybe the week before. So they find a way to win. I remember week 1 last year against the Browns. I was all over the Browns, and what did they do? They backdoored me real good on that one. And it seems like that's a recurring theme. It's a team that fights to the end, and it seems like no lead is safe enough. So I'd probably look towards the under more so than anything in that game, but would still lean towards, I think, the Bengals on that one as well.
Perfect. And yeah, just for myself, I probably would take the Bucks money line instead of +1. Just, I don't know how you feel about whether or not you would take a spread in that instance. For me, it's very rare that a team will lose by 1 point and not, and still cover. And then even then you'd only get a push in that point. You might as well just take the money line at that particular moment. And then Eagles +4 versus the Cowboys. I'm the type who emotionally hedges all the time. I'll fade my Cowboys at any instance that I can when they're favorites, because that means that if they win, I'm super happy. If they lose, at least I have a little money to show for it.
Yeah, the classic win-win scenario there. The Bucs is an interesting one. I like to blindly bet Tom Brady. He has a 58.3% cover rate over the course of 44 games coming into the season. And I think what they're 1-1 in the season. So that remains about true. I mean, that's one of the most sure thing bets since Floyd Mayweather in the world of sports, being able to cover at that percentage over that period of time. Like, at that point, I think you can almost ride them blindly. I think my biggest concern in that game here, you look at yards per play on both offensive defense. The Rams do have the advantage there on offense, 6.9 versus 6.2, on defense, 5.0 versus 5.5. So it seems like a wash. I don't necessarily know that there's a sharp angle to be taking there. I think if you have the yards per play advantage and then you're looking at the home field advantage, maybe you do take the home underdog at +1.
Yeah, and I think for this game specifically, with the total in the low to mid 50s, I'd probably be considering the over here. I know that obviously both defenses are fairly strong, but I think that the Bucs specifically, they can be passed on. And with Matthew Stafford now there, and the way that Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods have looked through 2 games, I really think that the Rams will still be able to put up 25 points on them. And then, of course, the Bucs, I think they could score on anybody, and I think that that shouldn't even be in question, especially now where they're coming from and just kind of rolling into the season. So I think that would probably be the bet that I would look at instead of picking a side. But again, I'm more of a plus money guy, so I probably end up all line total, probably taking 5 points over the closing total just to get a little plus money action.
Sure, I love it.
Now, Geoff, we're going to get some rapid fire Q&A to wrap up the show, but I ask all of my guests this, and the reason why I do is because I love to bring contemporaries like yourself onto the show to help educate and just kind of maybe give me some perspective, and also our viewers as well, about gambling Twitter, and where I've probably become a Z-list celebrity, I guess that you could call that, in those waters. And I guess what I wanted to know is, and you could help enlighten me on this, is why do people in gambling Twitter take everything so seriously? Like every comment that we make, I like to crack jokes. I like to, make just kind of sarcastic comments. And sometimes I feel like tone kind of gets lost. And I just wanted to know from your perspective, what do you think it is of why people on gambling Twitter take everything we say so seriously?
Yeah, I don't think it's unique to gambling Twitter, ultimately. Scroll through Facebook and hit literally any thread, and you have people flipping out over the stupidest shit left and right. Why? I mean, I think it's a classic look in the mirror. You're insecure about something that you feel the need to pop off and prove superiority over somebody else, which at the end of the day, ultimately isn't all that rewarding. Find happiness within you, and you won't be blasting off on other people on Twitter. I think is kind of the mantra there. Obviously easier said than done, but if you feel like you're unheard, Twitter's a good spot to be heard, to have an opinion. Everybody has that voice, and some people are more aggressive with it and not. You lose a couple bad bets, you're going to come on Twitter a little hot, and maybe say something you potentially regret. I don't know. I find whenever, I've ever lashed out on the internet that ultimately I've just felt worse about it later on, even if it's good, if it's felt in the moment. So now that I'm over the big 3-0, truly the old man who bets, I try to just be a little more rational. If I'm feeling emotional, take a step back, take a breath, and figure out what I want to truly say. So I don't know, say la vie.
No, and I love that you kind of brought it out that way, just to kind of explain that it's not always what you did or what you said kind of thing. It could be just that person has had a bad day or whatever, maybe tailed one of your bets and probably put more money on it than they needed to, when you're constantly reminding people of bankroll management and fiscal responsibility, and I think obviously as we get into our 30s, I think that lesson rings true even more every day. And I think that's the one thing that I want people to kind of, again, it's not a real big movement here, but I'm trying to get people just to lighten up a little bit, like nobody takes a loss when I post it more worse than I do, because I'm the one who actually put real money on it, like my money that I lost. I'm happy that you were able to tail and you're able to win, and I'm sad if you lost too. But at the same time, come on, you wouldn't even say this to me in real life if we met in person.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, the power of the internet warrior, of course. And I think you bring up a bigger issue of betting outside your means, betting to have entertainment, betting and not even having the expectation to win. I think a lot of people just bet to bet. It's something to do, which obviously then you lose. It sours that experience of the game. You bet a little too much. But, it's one of those things that you look over a large sample size. I've got close to 6,000 bets tracked. I'm up 135 units. There was stretches of minus 45 units in 3 weeks, right? I was going through some shit. I wasn't on my game and the ball bounced the wrong way. If you only tail that, then obviously I've lost you a pretty good amount of money. On the other side, there's, spurts of 40 units left and right here as well. A couple sweeps in a row. And
you look
then
like
all of a sudden I'm a god, right?
Yeah.
And it's neither of those things. It's the consistency of one bet at a time. I always try to say bet by bet we build, because I'm the only get rich scheme I'm looking for these days is small cap biotech, FDA pre-approval stocks. And even those I don't win on very often, but that at least has a moonshot, right? And that is I can buy at 30 cents and hopefully they get FDA approval. It shoots at $12. That's not what this show's about. That doesn't really exist unless you're ripping parlays, which is a losing endeavor, obviously. Why the books make so much money on them. So I think at the end of the day, it's not sexy to win 0.7 units today and then 0.3 tomorrow and then 0.6 the next day and then lose 1.5 the day after. But over the course of a year, over the course of 2 years, over the course of a month, or however long, that adds up. And those small wins turn into big wins. Those small wins give you a bankroll that you're actually able to increase your unit size without then sweating the extra pressure of betting more money. So it's that long and strong mentality that sadly is just the antithesis of human behavior.
I love it. Dude, couldn't have said it better. Thank you very much, Old Man Who Bets, who has now proclaimed that he's officially old, hitting 30 years old. So we're going to do now rapid fire Q&A, Geoff. All
Sure.
you need to do, we just answer it. We don't really need to get too deep into analysis. I might comment quickly, but we're going to move quickly here. Okay. So I've got about 7 to 8 questions and then we're going to wrap up here. So first question, who's winning the AFC North?
Who is winning the AFC North? Great question. Let me pull up the division here. I think it's going to be the Ravens.
Ravens it is. Geoff, one of the reasons I love following you is your love for really all genres of music, but some of the bands that you promoted and turned me on to. And just random question, what's the first concert you ever saw?
First concert I ever went to was a band called Houston Calls, a great pop punk band from North Jersey. They played at the School of Rock in South Hackensack. And one of my favorite local bands from Rockaway, New Jersey, Red Light, Green Light, was opening for them. They were homies, went to college together, I believe.
Nice.
And then to bring that full circle, the last show that Houston Calls ever played was also at the School of Rock in South Hackensack, and it also had Red Light, Green Light supporting on it. So it was a pretty cool kind of 1-2 punch through their circle of life. 1-2
punch to your heart. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was an emotional day.
Yeah. All right. This one is called F, Marry, Kill. I'm going to read 3 type of people. You have to decide if you F them, marry them, or kill them. You ready?
Sure.
Someone who thinks the Brooklyn Nets are a more storied franchise than the New York Knicks. That's person number 1. Person number 2, someone who thinks lacrosse is for wimps. Person number 3, someone who thinks the new taunting rule in the NFL is great for the game.
Oof, man. I think I'm just killing all 3 of them, honestly. I am definitely killing the Nets fan that thinks they're a more storied franchise than the Knicks. I guess I'm marrying the taunting rule because that's somebody who just really believes in sportsmanship and doing the right thing. and they probably have a pretty good set of morals and probably aren't sports fans, and that's okay. They could give me my Sunday to myself, hopefully.
Somebody you can bring home to mom, you know?
Yeah, and then I'm probably fucking the the person who thinks the lacrosse is a wimp, and that's just ignorance, baby. They haven't been exposed to the game. That's something hopefully I could show them.
Yeah,
That's
turn the tide.
not the case.
Turn the tide.
Exactly.
Okay, true or false? Zach Wilson is the new turnover king in New York over Daniel Jones.
True.
True or false? Derek Carr, we talked about him earlier in the show, will lead the league in passing yards this season.
False.
Thursday nighter, Panthers Texans. We just found out Tyrod Taylor's not going to be playing. Carolina is -7.5. Which side are we taking here?
I'm probably taking Carolina there. I might even look at a first half bet. I think they've been pretty good out of the gate.
Absolutely. If someone offered you 10,000 to 1 odds for the Texans to make the playoffs and you had to bet a full unit, would you take that bet?
It's just one unit. Yes.
All right. Final question, Geoff. Very near and dear to my heart. One of the reasons why I love following you is your positivity. Great slogan of "It's a great day to have a great day." Final question here. Is there ever a great day to have a bad day?
I think no. I think great day for a great day is more perception, right? If you zoom out far enough, it is a good day. I'm lucky to be sitting here talking with you. I'm lucky to have a roof over my head. I'm lucky to be employed. I'm lucky to have food on the table, right? And so maybe my bet lost. Maybe I sprained my ankle playing basketball, all of which are, privileged things to do at the end of the day. So you zoom out far enough, somebody's got it worse. And I'm always trying to be as grateful as possible. And that alone makes it a great day.
And that happened to me just yesterday. I went 0-3 on my touchdown scorer picks, but I had a great day with my kids. Was able to have a really fun evening before the football game. There was no way that an 0-3 night was going to spoil that day for me. So that's kind of the mindset that I take from a lot of the times when you tweet is some of that stuff, just being able to kind of zoom out and say, look, what's important here?
Mm-hmm. Amen, man. I'm glad you were able to weather the storm and still find a positive,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we
Easier
go,
said
Geoff,
than done a lot of times, but yeah, go ahead.
We're going to wrap up here, but before we go, Geoff, I want you to tell the folks who are watching, anybody who plans to watch this again throughout the week, how can they find your work? What do you got going on here for the NFL season?
Yeah, man, for sure. Well, thank you again, obviously, for having me on here, G. Great to chat. If you ever need somebody else to come back again, I could make myself available. Who am I? I'm Geoff. I'm the old man who bets. You can find my content on Twitter. Always free all the time. Also on Instagram, budding, hopefully on TikTok eventually, but it's hard to put out that much content a day. I do some work for 1:37 p.m. We have a podcast with the Odds Fellow. Shout out to Ant called Short-Term High Volatility Investments that drops every Thursday at 8 a.m. Where we talk about the best bets of the week in life, love, pursuit of happiness, everything in between. We even talked about some pumpkin beers last week, and it's almost that time. What else? I do some work for DraftKings every now and again. I'll pop up on their feed, trying to put some more content together for them coming up. But if you ever need me, I'm always available on Twitter. Trying to spread the good word, trying to bring data in sports into a profitable endeavor. And some days we're good, some days we're bad, but ultimately, again, bet by bet, we try to build it. We're focusing on that long and strong mentality.
Again, another slogan, the bet by bet. I think people need to understand that perspective. So that's all for me. It's Dawg Day Afternoon here live. I want to thank Geoff Shasby, who joined me today. That's AKA Old Man Who Bets. Follow him on Twitter at Old Man Who Bets. All my writing content you can find over at FTN Bets, and you can catch me every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern for Touchdown Town, where I give my best touchdown scores of the week. Thank you for watching. I'm Gilles Gallant with BetsTV, and bon chance.